Holocaust Memories Never Forget. A Gentile baby boomer's painful journey into the Shoah. Section 7, Death Marches. Part 2. From early in the war until May 1945. The Death March from Majdanek. In the spring of 1944, with fast-moving Soviet forces approaching the Polish border, Himmler began the process of relocating the prisoners at Majdanek extermination camp near Lublin. He also demanded that the camp's gas chambers and crematoria be destroyed, but it was already too late. On the 23rd of July 1944, the Soviet army liberated Majdanek camp essentially intact and gave the world proof of Hitler's campaign of mass murder and genocide. Desperate to hide any further evidence of their crimes, the Nazis began a large-scale evacuation of all the major concentration and labor camps east of Germany. Rail transportation was scarce or unavailable, forcing some prisoners to march over long distances without food, water, or proper clothing during one of the coldest winters on record. The death toll for these marches was horrendous, and in some cases well over half of the prisoners who started out died along their route. Additionally, Himmler's order of the 17th of June 1944 to not leave behind any living prisoners was usually interpreted by the guards to mean that they were free to kill whomever they wanted without fear of reprisal. A number of earlier death marches have already been described, allowing us more time to examine a few of the largest and most deadly that took place before Germany surrendered. The Death Marches from Auschwitz. Following the revolt on the 7th of October 1944 at Auschwitz and the destruction of Crematoria No. 4 by Sonderkommandos, Himmler demanded that all three of Auschwitz's main camps and all their subcamps be evacuated, along with the destruction of all remaining gas chambers and crematoria. In July 1944, there were over 90,000 prisoners still at Auschwitz, and by January 1945, as Soviet forces advanced deeper into Poland, that number had only gone down to 67,000. The evacuation of Auschwitz and all its subcamps began on the 17th of January 1945. Every few hours, groups of prisoners who could walk were assembled in different sites, each to be force-marched to different destinations. Anyone who couldn't walk was shot, and it took several days to empty the camp of more than 60,000 prisoners. One group of prisoners was headed to Wostislavslaski, 39 miles away, while the other group was marched 34 miles to Gliwice, and the guards in both groups were told that trains would be waiting to pick up the prisoners upon their arrival. On both routes, prisoners from outlying subcamps joined those who had left from the three main camps. The weather was exceedingly cold. Few of the prisoners had anything close to real winter clothing to protect them, food and water were essentially non-existent, and having to sleep out in the open at night caused many prisoners to freeze to death by morning. One of the longest marches was made from Neudax, a subcamp of Auschwitz, during which 3,200 prisoners were force-marched 250 kilometers, or 155 miles, to Gross-Rosen. Trains and open wagons were waiting for the prisoners at Gliwice and Wojciechowski, but their treatment throughout their journey remained inhumane and murderous. All the prisoners who somehow survived these death marches eventually ended up at one of four concentration camps: Gross-Rosen in western Poland, Buchenwald and Sachsenhausen in Germany, and Mauthausen in Austria. The final death toll for these marches was estimated to be from 9,000 to 15,000, but this didn't take into account those who died shortly after arriving at their destination or the deeply debilitating physical, emotional, and psychological toll that survivors endured for the rest of their lives. Many people have the general misconception that only the SS was responsible for the deaths and executions of prisoners at the camps and on these forced marches, but in reality, several other military organizations and civilian Nazi agencies were involved. One of the main reasons for this was the great shortage of soldiers who could still fight. Earlier in the war, Himmler had begun transitioning trained SS soldiers back to the battlefield and replacing them with numerous other personnel. Along with using the Volkssturm, German males between the ages of 16 and 60 who were not currently assigned to the active military, he also called back into service veterans of aged 40 and older to be used as camp guards, as well as on these death marches. Other men were also used, including German policemen assigned to the territory, personnel from the SD, and members of local SS-trained ethnic militia groups who had willingly participated in the murder of hundreds of thousands of Jews and other Untermenschen during the war. Most surprisingly, however, members of the Hitler Youth were also assigned as guards during certain forced marches, and though records show that these teenagers participated reluctantly, a few of them admitted to taking part in killing prisoners. There was significant confusion among the guards on these various marches concerning two critical issues. Number one, who was ultimately responsible for ensuring that a given group of prisoners made it from point A to point B? Number two, and most importantly, who might be held responsible for the deaths of any prisoners who never reached their destinations? Not surprisingly, this lack of clear-cut orders led to some gruesome massacres along the way. It also added enormous difficulty for the prosecutors at various war crimes tribunals to definitively place the blame on a given soldier, officer, or Nazi official.